You are watching Germantown Municipal Television, your source for everything Germantown.
Hello and welcome to Weather Watch on Germantown Municipal Television. I'm your host Finnegan Gruggett, a student here at Houston High School. In this episode, we will talk about how weather impacts the Memphis FedEx hub. We'll kick off the show with Kory Gempler, a meteorologist at FedEx. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So as we start off the show, would you mind explaining what your daily responsibilities are at the FedEx hub?
Sure, we have a staff of 15 meteorologists who work 24/7, 365 days a year. They're responsible for mainly supporting our aircraft dispatchers and the pilots that run the express side of the airline, that part of the airline that delivers your package in 1 to 2 days. So mostly what we do is we provide airport forecasts so they can develop a flight plan, because basically the aircraft dispatcher is like a pilot on the ground. We coordinate with them. Bad weather dictates more fuel on the airplane. We interact with the pilots via phone and with briefings, and then we're also there to do other things. But basically, we're there to support the air operations side of FedEx Express.
Okay, so you guys just focus on the aviation part, not the ground part.
Well, about 80%. Like we do some trucking briefings on Fridays. You know, when the package gets to an airport, its destination doesn't end there. It has to get on a truck from the airport to another facility. So in big storms or major weather events, we do support the ground side, but those are the FedEx vehicles, the express vehicles that are delivering the packages, the trucks that are going maybe across the highway system. And we do other support for the other operating companies like FedEx Ground. We provide them some maps or detailed briefings if we're needed to, but that's on more of an ad hoc term.
Okay. So how many meteorologists are on staff?
15 meteorologists on staff. The department started in 1986, so about 13 years after the company started. So this will be our 30th year of the FedEx Meteorology Department. We've grown a little over the years, and we haven't really changed too much, but you know, there to support the flight ops side, but we're also branching out into some other things as well.
So are they there 24 hours a day?
Yes, 24 hours, 7 days a week, holidays, weekends. There's always a meteorologist in our Global Operations Center where the aircraft dispatchers are at all times, because there's always a FedEx plane in the air for support.
So those meteorologists, what area do they forecast for?
We focus on North America. The 43 cities that we issue forecasts for during the day, which are called TAFs, which stands for Terminal Aerodrome Forecast. Aerodrome is just another fancy word for airport. Those are issued 3-4 times a day, basically in North America. We do some international cities in India routinely, and we also have the capability to issue a forecast basically anywhere in the globe where we fly into, under an FAA certified program called EWINS, which stands for Enhanced Weather Information System. It's the FAA grants us approval, says we're okay with the meteorologists we have, the equipment we have to write forecast anywhere. So we do have that capability as needed.
So those forecasts, do they go directly to the pilots, or do you share some of that information with air traffic controllers?
Once we post the forecast, the TAFs as we call them, they go into our flight planning system. They're available for the dispatcher to pull up on their system. They're available in a flight planning system for the pilot to look at. So a pilot can be, you know, at a ramp getting his release and sees the forecast from FedEx Meteorology. He can call the FedEx Meteorology Department and talk to a meteorologist. The aircraft dispatcher in the room can walk over and ask us a question. So that's kind of the advantage of having our own meteorology department, is we're there at the drop of a hat for expertise. You can't really call the weather service sometimes if you don't agree with their forecast or want some additional detail. So that's why we're really in the room.
So the meteorology center, is that near the dispatch center? So if there's a storm coming, you can get in contact with them where they can send out the information?
Exactly. Once we put the forecast out, we continue to monitor the forecast and amend it as needed because we all know weather changes. So when we do make an amendment, we'll announce it over the phone, over the intercom system, so all the aircraft dispatchers know that it's amended. Also, it will pop up on their desktop that this airport has been amended. And so we really are like kind of weather watchdogs. We're kind of just watching out for weather. Wherever bad weather can trip us up or cause delays, our focus is to make sure that our internal customers get that information so that they can manage the weather and work around the weather.
So do you guys ever work with the aviation part of the National Weather Service?
We do. We work with the meteorologists over at the Center Weather Service Unit, which is over at the Air Traffic and Route Control Center at the FAA here in Memphis. We work through a platform called NWS Chat, where we text each other. We don't really pick up the phone and talk to each other much, but we coordinate our forecast with them. We also coordinate the forecast with the WFO here in Memphis Germantown office. So there's three kind of meteorology components all involved and throwing ideas off each other to come up with a good, solid forecast and a collaborative effort for Memphis.
So when you're making your forecast, what are some of the things that you look at?
We're looking at everything. Our weather system has, satellite, lightning, text products, model data. We also look at some external sites. There's a lot of good college websites that have model data, some FAA products that are exclusive to us that we're using for forecast radar. Soundings, anything that we can get our hands on through our own internal weather system, which is provided by a weather vendor, and they kind of take all the lightning and satellite data and package it all and ship it to us into our weather system. So we're all there just looking at a computer, looking at the data, and using that information to make our forecast.
So when you're forecasting for extreme weather, do you guys ever lease weather balloons, or do you leave that for the Weather Service?
No, but that's something that's come up recently. There is an effort at Mississippi State that actually does, the graduate program releases balloons in times of severe weather when it's expected in the area, because the nearest soundings, balloons, go up at Little Rock and Nashville, which Memphis is kind of in that void in between. And Memphis Weather Service does not have the funding to launch balloons. So we're actually looking at maybe partnering with Mississippi State to have them come up here, and not necessarily in severe weather, but more winter weather situations, because we need to know the height of the freezing level and if the models are going to verify. So we're in discussions with Mississippi State about doing that.
So when flights get canceled, FedEx flights, are you guys responsible for making the call on that, or is that air traffic control?
No, that's all taken part of the Global Operations Center people. Those are the dispatch groups. So when I say GOC, those are the dispatchers in the group, and they basically run the airline. So they're going to take our information and our input on a forecast, whether it's a major winter storm in the Northeast or an ice storm in Memphis. They'll take our information, we'll get on telecons and conference calls, and then they'll make that decision. So we don't have anything to do with those calls. They take our information and base those decisions on it.
Since FedEx is the FedEx hub in Memphis, how does the weather here in Memphis impact the whole world in terms of packages?
Well, it is the worldwide hub, so a lot of the packages that come into the U.S. go through the Memphis hub. Now, we do have other hubs in Indianapolis, Oakland, and Newark, and Dallas. So if there's going to be bad weather in Memphis, we try and kind of relocate some of those packages to those other hubs so they kind of stay out of trouble. But eventually some of those packages have to come through Memphis and be sorted here. So if there's delays in Memphis because of thunderstorms or icing, there may be some delays worldwide, but again, we try and leverage the multiple hubs that we have to avoid those situations.
I think that's a great place to take a break. We have to take a quick break. We'll be back in a minute to talk more with Kory Gempler. Please stay with us.
Get caught buzz driving, and you could do some hard time.
Craig, knock it off.
Sorry, Mom.
It could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates. And that could set you back a few years. Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
Hey, Hard, what's this?
That's my resignation letter.
You're resigning.
Why? Because you're constantly ignoring me. You're half as active as you used to be, and you get stuff like this. You've been putting me under a lot of pressure lately. That's why I'm ready to quit.
I forgot. I'll do better. Please, don't quit on me.
Okay, but remember, it's not what you say, it's what you do.
Listen to your heart. Don't let it quit on you.
Let's go for a walk.
Uncontrolled high blood pressure could lead to a stroke, heart attack, or death. Get yours to a healthy range before it's too late.
You are watching Germantown Municipal Television, your source for everything Germantown.
Welcome back. I'm Finnegan Gruggett, and you're viewing Weather Watch. With us today, discussing how weather impacts the FedEx hub, is Kory Gempler of FedEx. So earlier we were talking about how weather impacts the Memphis area and what different steps you take. How does severe weather impact the Memphis area rather than winter weather?
Well, the good thing about severe weather usually is it's transient. You know, storms are going to come and go. They're going to move, and sometimes they will stay over the field for a long time. And that's probably the worst case scenario, is when we get thunderstorms training over the field. And basically, pilots don't want to land in low-level wind shear, and microburst and downburst. So it's a safety hazard. So the FAA knows that. Our pilots know that. So they're going to be on the cautious side when it comes to landing aircraft. So if we hold for a certain amount of time and we can't land at the airport, then we'll have to divert to our alternate, which is kind of where we come in. We need to make sure that we've told them that there's going to be thunderstorms tonight, so they can have enough fuel on the aircraft to divert to an alternate, which we don't like to do, but sometimes for safety you have to do that.
So when you're forecasting severe weather, do you look at different things, since it's aviation, that the Weather Service doesn't look at?
A little bit, because we're looking at en route weather and also landing at the airport. So we're coordinating with our ATC group. Our ATC group in GOC is made up of past controllers for the FAA usually, and they know how the system works. So we're looking at things like arrival rate. So we don't want to over-deliver airplanes to the airport. Let's say we want to deliver 80 airplanes, and you can only land 70. So now we have to come up with a plan and work with the FAA. So we're looking at all sorts of things, but mostly a lot with the Weather Service as well.
So when you're making the decision about the weather, do you forecast just for the major hubs that FedEx has, or do you forecast for all the airports that FedEx lands at?
We forecast for all of our hubs and a lot of our major markets, and then some other cities, but it's a total of about 43 U.S. airports. Those other airports that we fly into, we rely on the National Weather Service forecast because we have other things that we can do, but we focus on those 43, the hubs, major markets we call them, where there's a lot of high volume, high dollar freight going into those markets.
So how do you guys forecast for such a large area? Since you said there were 43 airports you forecast for, how is it possible to forecast for that big of an area?
Luckily, technology. I mean, we have all the observations from all these locations around the world. There's the power of the internet today. All the countries around the world pretty much report routine weather forecast. So we use that data, and we also use the data that comes into our weather system, satellite, lightning information. We also depend on worldwide global coverage of model data, so that's gotten better. So with all those tools, we're able to make a forecast.
So when you're forecasting, say there's a big winter storm on the East Coast, do you guys focus mainly on that area, on that storm, until that storm moves out of the area?
Yeah, well, if it's going to be a major snowstorm, especially in the Northeast, there's going to be conference calls. The GOC people internally will want snow amounts, when it's going to start, when it's going to end, are there going to be crosswind limitations, what the runways are going to be like. So we provide all that information to them, and then they come up with a plan, a contingency plan, or usually more than one plan, to work around the weather. What's the latest we can get a flight out of there before the winds become an issue? So we're just feeding that information to our Global Operations Control Center people.
So with severe weather and winter weather, what are some of the different things that you guys look at other than tornadoes in terms of aviation? What are you concerned about?
Well, there's a lot of things. Obviously, you've got turbulence. Now, we do care about turbulence. People might think that, we just carry boxes, but there's people flying the airplanes, and we do carry some precious cargo like animals and cows and show horses. So we do care about turbulence. Icing is an issue. You know, our aircraft have de-icing capabilities on them, so that's not a major issue, but it still could be an issue. Volcanic ash. If there's a volcano that erupts internationally somewhere over between Anchorage and Japan, where we have international flights flying, we need to get that information to the dispatchers in the room right away, saying, hey, a volcano has erupted. You may need to change your flight to stay out of that volcanic ash. Space weather is another hazard of aviation. So there's all sorts of hazards out there for aviation.
So say Memphis were to get a winter storm, do you guys give some of your information to the Memphis air traffic controllers to let them know, or are they aware from the Weather Service?
Yeah, we coordinate with them a little bit, but more importantly, I think it's important to tell the airport authority what we're thinking, because they are the ones outside of our ramp. They're the ones that's going to be responsible for clearing the runways and the taxiways. So they're usually on a conference call when we have these snow cons issued for Memphis that the meteorology department puts out. So if we're going to have a big snow or ice storm, they need to be in the loop as far as, you know, what we're thinking and what we're expecting, start time, end time, accumulation, et cetera.
So is the airport authority in charge of clearing the runways, or is that FedEx responsibility?
That is the airport authorities. However, we have a large ramp that has parking spaces for nearly 200 aircraft. So we have to keep that area clean of contaminants. So we have to come up with a plan. If it's going to be a major storm, we might shut down part of the ramp and say, we're going to clear this part, and then we kind of move the planes over and clear the rest of it. So it's an orchestrated event.
So when you're alerting pilots about winter weather or severe weather, how much lead time do you usually give them?
Well, if we're talking to the pilots, it's generally within 24 hours. Because, you know, they might get bumped off a trip, or they might not end up taking that trip, whatever, or they might change. But for the GOC, the dispatch group in the room, we might tell them days in advance, say, hey, next Wednesday, it could be a rough night here with thunderstorms. And then if it's a winter event, we start at 48 hours putting out snow alerts as we kind of count down to the event start time. And that way, they know what to expect, and they can start making plans each time we move down a level closer to the event.
So do you guys look at anything when you're landing when a FedEx plane lands at an airport? Are there any parameters you look at to make sure that it's safe for them to land?
Sure, yeah, crosswinds are an issue. But a lot of it is kind of real time, like braking action. So when an aircraft lands maybe in front of a FedEx plane, they're going to report a braking action. So they might radio the tower, and the tower will come back to FedEx and say braking action is nil because of maybe freezing rain. So then the FedEx plane might not choose to land because it's a safety issue. But our forecast should have that in there, not what the braking action is going to be, but you know, if it should have freezing rain, so they should know that it's going to be a tricky landing.
Okay, that's a great place to take a break. We'll be back after this quick break. Please stay with us.
So who's going to do what?
I'll pack the dead batteries.
Great.
I'll only put what I don't need into a duffel bag.
Perfect. That's totally unhelpful.
No problem.
Meanwhile, I will try to comfort everyone by speaking in a calm voice. And who is going to handle supplies?
I can forget to do a list for us.
Thanks, pal.
We couldn't be any less prepared. I'm proud of you guys.
Talk to your kids about who to call, where to meet, what to pack. Visit ready.gov/kids for tips and information.
Don't worry, the 74 people were picked before me in the NFL draft.
To fight childhood obesity, United Way and the NFL are helping kids play at least 60 minutes a day.
Okay, time for the team obstacle course. Yay!
What this place needs is more healthy kids. To get involved or donate, go to unitedway.org/play60.
Now I get it.
You are watching Germantown Municipal Television, your source for everything Germantown.
Welcome back. I'm Finnegan Gruggett, and you're tuned into Weather Watch. We want to spend our last moments talking about how extreme weather impacts FedEx with Kory Gempler. Thank you for coming on to the show again.
Thank you for having me.
So, what type of severe weather or winter weather concerns you guys the most?
Well, warm season severe event, the worst thing that could happen to the Memphis airport would be obviously a large tornado that would take out the hub and the sorting facility and some aircraft, or a large hail storm. Obviously hail and then airplanes don't mix. That's a big threat, but fortunately those are pretty isolated type events. In the wintertime, it's generally an ice storm. Snow is fairly easy to push around and shovel, but if you get that rain, freezing rain, sleet, snow, all compacted, and then temperatures fall below zero for a day or two, or below freezing, you're gonna have that just adhere to the concrete, and it's very difficult to move. So that's probably the worst case scenarios for warm and cold seasons.
So on the FedEx airplanes, what procedures are in place for winter weather? Do they de-ice them even when the surface temperature's above freezing?
Yes, we can have instances where we have to de-ice an aircraft because of the condensation of the wing, and the fuel in the wing can actually cause some frost with temperatures as high as 44 degrees. So sometimes we're de-icing, it might take 3-4 minutes to de-ice an aircraft of some of that frost on the wing. But generally, if it's a snow event, you've got an ice event, it's kind of what's called a car wash. The airplanes pull out to a certain area, we have trucks pull up to the airplane and basically put anti-ice and de-ice fluid on the aircraft and clear all the contaminants, and that can take 10 to 20 minutes per aircraft, and a lot of gallons of fluid too go on that aircraft.
So earlier in the show you mentioned crosswinds. What exactly are crosswinds and how do they impact flights?
Well, the aircraft manufacturers, Boeing and Airbus, have limits. They make recommendations in the manuals that you should not try and land this aircraft in certain crosswind limits. Generally, they're anywhere from about 25 to 45 knots, depending on the size of the aircraft. So as a pilot's coming down the runway, he doesn't want to be pushed off to the side too much, so it makes it very difficult to land in a crosswind. So we know those thresholds, and the dispatchers also know the thresholds, so they're wary of what those limits are.
Okay, so here in Memphis, how does the weather here impact world travel or packages when they will arrive on time?
Well, if it's going to be bad weather in Memphis, things could be slowed down a little bit, but we do our best to manage it. Basically, there are 3 runways we can land on at night, and we generally bring in about 150 aircraft in a 3-hour time period between 10 p.m. and 1 a.m. If the weather is bad enough, they'll reduce it down to 2 runways, so now we're limited to how many aircraft we can deliver to the airport. So we might have to slow them down in the air, maybe slow them down on the ground, departing their cities, coming into Memphis. But generally, it doesn't happen too often where it's a major slowdown.
Okay, so when there's significant weather somewhere, do you guys try to get as many planes in before that weather moves in, or do you try to get them to fly around it and land at the nearest airport?
Well, safety comes first. So we're not going to jeopardize the crews flying that airplane. But when there's major events like, say a hurricane or tropical storm is going to hit maybe Mobile, Alabama, and we'll give them a forecast, and they'll look at the forecast and determine what's the latest time they can take off that's safe. And so yes, we try and get out as late as possible, and then we also try and get in as early as possible. As soon as an airport opens up in the Northeast after a snowstorm, as long as the braking action is good, we have employees there to offload the aircraft. We like to get in there as soon as we can to resume operations.
So what are some of the main impacts if there's a delayed flight, other than packages will be delayed? Are there any other impacts?
No, not really. I mean, it all kind of a chain reaction domino effect. But we have a lot of contingency plans, a lot of redundancies in place, alternate hubs that can absorb some of the value. So we try and get up if there are some delays. It doesn't really slow us down too long.
So what's the main difference between the weather department and FedEx and, say, the National Weather Service or a news station?
Well, we're focused on 3 things: protecting our people, protecting our assets, and protecting our brand, the FedEx brand. So we've got 340,000 team members around the world. So we need to be looking at everything from, and we don't predict earthquakes and tsunami or earthquakes and volcanoes, but we have to be watching out for those things. We have to be worried about tropical storms, any kind of earth science event that could impact our assets, our planes, our buildings, our people, because the airline is nothing without its people. So the package just doesn't end when it gets to the airport like a passenger carrier, or the Weather Service is looking at a broad area, we're kind of focusing in on that airport most of the time. But if it's a major system, we'll start looking at the roads as well. So a little different.
You mentioned tropical storms and hurricanes. Do you guys take the hurricane forecast or the path that it could possibly take from the National Hurricane Center, or do you guys try to make your own forecast to see what impacts that possible hurricane or tropical storm will have on airports?
Yeah, we use the Hurricane Center track, but we also, in our briefings, will provide some additional coverage. Like if there's an error in the forecast, we believe it is to the right or to the left, and future tracks you may see that. So we use their official track, but we also throw in our own meteorological reasoning as how we think it might be different.
How do operations change from spring severe weather season to maybe winter weather? What are some of the different things that change in between those two seasons?
Well, in the winter, once we get out of that winter season, we don't have to worry about issuing snowcon messages, those snow alerts that go out to the facilities. That's always a sigh of relief in the company, especially in Memphis, when we don't have to issue those anymore. But then it's on to the hail season and tornado season. And hail is a major hazard for aircraft, and so the company is, and the meteorology department is also involved in some other hail mitigation processes. And we will actually, the company has been known to move aircraft out of areas where we give them a forecast that there's a high risk of hail and/or tornadoes at this hub, say Oklahoma City. They will actually move aircraft out of that area based on our forecast. So it's always something going on at FedEx.
So when forecasting hail, what's the difference between the Weather Service, where they may focus on areas closer to the ground? Do you guys focus mainly above the ground, or?
No, generally, thunderstorms should be avoided when you're in the air. So that's kind of at the pilot's discretion, and also the air traffic controller who's controlling. They should not, send them into thunderstorms. So we're looking at things on the ground, just like the Weather Service would, but more centric at the airport, not just the whole, Memphis area.
We have about a minute left, and what things you guys look at in terms of winter weather? Again, we were talking about how it may impact flights. Are there other things you look at?
No, what we found out is that you have to look at what the impact to the airline is going to be. So we can tell them it's going to start here and end here, but now we have to get into the business of, okay, after it ends, it's going to be below freezing for 27 hours, so this is going to be very hard to melt. They always ask us, when's it going to get above freezing? So we're not looking at just the window of the event, we're also looking at the impact, how it's going to impact us during the event and also downline.
Thank you for coming on to the show. I appreciate all this information.
Thanks for having me.
Well, that's all the time we have for this episode. I'd like to thank Kory Gempler for taking the time out of his day to be on our show. If you'd like to learn more about this show or simply watch more of our programs, please visit www.gmtvonline.org. Until next time, this has been Finnegan Gruggett for this month's installment of Weather Watch.